You're listening to Cooper Talk.
Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guests. And I got to tell you, people, we have a really great show today. We have a gentleman who's not only a big rock and roller, he's an accomplished classical musician, and he has a new concept album that just came out. It's called Get Jack, and my guest is Kip Winger. How you doing, Kip?
Good. How are you, man?
I'm good, man. So you have this new album coming out, Get Jack, and it's a concept album, as you said. Were you a fan of concept albums growing up as a kid?
Well, yes and no. I mean, there weren't too many concept albums out when I was. I mean, okay, there was like Aqualung and some other Well, I mean, the Beatles did some stuff, but I was never like a fan of concept albums per se. I just it's not. It's a musical. I wanted to write a bigger piece of music after I did my last classical piece with Conversations with Nijinsky. I wanted to write a greater, bigger work and write for other singers. So I either wanted to do an opera or a musical. And so this is a musical. And when we use the term concept album, it's a concept album based on the fact that when you do a musical, it goes under so many rewrites that we've already changed a lot of it, and so this is really like what you'd think of as the director's cut of the musical.
Now, putting it together, how did you come up with the idea? Tell my listeners what the idea is. It's Get Jack, and I listened to some of it, and it's very good, and it is very musically, which is great. But how did you come up with this concept? Tell them what it is, not concept. Well, tell them what it is and what it's about, and how'd you come up with it?
Well, it's mostly Damien's idea. He came up with he wanted to do a Jack the Ripper thing, and I was a little bit hesitant about it because of the whole Spinal Tap association. But when we talked about making it about the women, then I was like, okay, I can do this. And I wanted to make a kind of Sweeney Todd meets Tommy with a little bit of Queen mixed in there. And he's a very good storyteller and a really good lyricist, and so we worked 3.5 years on refining the story and refining the music, and so it developed over a course of 2 or 3 years, and but the basic story came from Damien. So I'm not a story guy. I can write some lyrics to a song here and there, and some are good and some aren't as good as others, but I'm not the guy that could lay out a whole story like a screenplay or a book to a musical or a novel or something like that. So mostly that came from him.
Now, how did you meet Damien? It's Damien Gray. How did you meet him?
I met him through a mutual friend who's a big Broadway orchestrator named Chris Yonke, who's done a lot of big-time Broadway orchestrating and conducting. And I met him through a couple of mutual friends. Him and I hit it off because even though he's high up in the Broadway thing, he's a metalhead and he was a fan of the band. And I told him to help me find a writer who I could work with. I met a couple people before Damien, and nothing ever stuck. But then he introduced me to Damien. I met Damien on a Skype session and knew instantly that I could work with him.
Now, you said it took 3 years, 2.5 years. Where do you start? What is block one when you're writing with someone who you really don't know that well? You each know of each other's work. Where do you start? How does that relationship start?
We just talked about what to do and what we thought the music. He mentioned early on kind of an Eric Satie feel in a. If anybody knows the Jack the Ripper stuff, there's a bar in London called the 10 Bells, which is a frequented bar by some of the women that he killed and supposedly Jack himself, although they don't know who he was, so they're just assuming that. But so we thought, smoky bar with Eric Satie music, because it was 1888, and so we kind of started there, and then he worked up the first version of the script, and I set a date to start as a start time to just crank out, 1 or 2 things, and while he was working on the first version of it, I was kind of conjuring up what I thought the sound should be. I kind of invented a scale for the whole thing, and I was working with, kind of how I wanted the intervals of the music to be, and come up with a theme and the general harmony concept of what I wanted it to be, which is a thread throughout the whole show. And then as the script developed, I started writing one song after the other, and then I would, I ended up writing a lot of melodies through what would normally be Broadway dialogue. So I approached it more like an opera where everything is sung through. There's a few talking moments, but most of it's sung through, which is unusual for a musical. That's a little bit more like an opera, but it's, it's kind of in the tradition of Sweeney Todd.
Now, when you're writing it, as you said, it's, how do you know where to arc? I mean, it's a story, and as you said, you're not a big storyteller. If you're writing a story, the arcs and the valleys and stuff like that. When you're writing the music for something like that, how do you control it? How do you keep the thought process going?
Well, I mean, I can tell a story with music. I'm not a guy, I'm not a wordsmith that could knock out a story because I don't know the components to create a story that's worth telling. But in music, I do know the components. So, I would read a scene and we would discuss, how we wanted the emotion to come. And I would refer to him a lot. I'd call him up and say, what do you want this to sound like? Because I'm hearing it like this. And, sometimes I'd go with his idea, and sometimes I'd go, let me do this. So let me just send this to you and see what you think of it, And we had a lot of simpatico because we had our relationship worked very well in terms of seeing eye to eye on where we were going and how we were building the story. So a lot of it was really challenging because I've never done anything like that. I mean, I've written for film before and stuff like that, but film is very subservient to the movie. It's really like the redheaded stepchild, so to speak. Nobody really cares, But in a musical, the music is front and center. It really has to drive the story completely. So, we would just talk about it, and sometimes if I had to change something a little bit to this or that, he would go, Not so much of that happened. I mean, we were pretty much on the mark, but it took me a long time to compose the music, and it took him a long time to continually develop the story to get to what's now on the quote concept album. So
when you're developing it, once you have the idea for the music and you're developing the music, how do you find the talent to sing on it? Do you use people Because I've listened to some, there's a woman talking, singing, and you said there's 5 different women. How do you find that talent, and are you very picky because it is a very dear to your heart project?
Very picky, but Damien's been in the theater world his whole life, so he knew, for example, Eden Espinosa, who's a very well-known Broadway singer, Katie Thompson, Carissa Hoagland, and I'd called up Carrie Manolakos. I just emailed her out of the blue because we were looking on YouTube for people that we thought might be good, and she blew me away. So we called her up, and she agreed to do it. And Levi Christ, we had a really difficult time coming up with somebody who would be able to play piano and sing the part and act it. I emailed Levi out of the blue. I just found him on the internet and sent him a message on Facebook, and thankfully he got back to me. And then PJ Griffith he's in Rock of Ages right now. He's a lead in Rock of Ages, and he was a friend of Damien's, and so we just kind of put it together between cold calls and friends, and kind of zeroed in on who we wanted to do it. And I spent a lot of time working on the vocals, and we recorded it all at Electric Ladyland, and then I edited for, it took me 2 or 3 months to edit all the vocals. And go ahead.
No, I was going to say, now when you're sitting there with all that good talent, is it like Hollywood? Do you sit down and have a table read? Is there rehearsals, or you just go straight to the studio because you want to get started on it?
Yeah, that was the interesting learning curve for me because I have never done it. So we put on a workshop. We rehearsed the whole thing for, I can't remember now, it was 7 days or something, where everybody learned the music, and then we put it on in front of an audience, all to my tracks. And then we did that again. Well, after we did that the first time, everybody knew the music very well, so we went into the studio after that first week and we recorded what you hear now as the album. But after we did that, we did another, well, we've done 3 table reads where you sit around a table and read it, refining the story. And then we did another workshop. We've done 2 other workshops since then, and the story's evolved quite a bit since what you hear now on the concept album. Like I say, the concept album came out of the first workshop, and it's really like the director's cut of this.
Now, when you had after the first workshop and you're workshopping it, I mean, getting prepared for it, did stuff change after that first workshop? Did you sit there and say, this isn't working, we got to do this, we should put this here?
Yeah, absolutely. But not on the album. We recorded the album with exactly what I went to the first rehearsal with. And then after that, it all started changing.
Now, I know you played classical music too. How do you think this will convey to your fan base? And I guess you have 2 different fan bases, but who is this? Is this for you also we're getting a new fan base because you have the musical fan base, or how do you see this album playing out with people that listen to you?
I've been very lucky that the people that enjoy my music understand that I don't do like a cookie cutter branding. I have 3 distinct areas in which I work, and this is now a 4th one, but more like, the Winger thing with me and Reb, and when Reb and I write, it's a very distinct sound. And then I've got my solo albums, which are much more like experimental pop, where I don't have any rules. And then I do my classical composition, which is very, I try to stay within the bandwidth of that whole world. And then now the musical thing, I try to speak the language of the territory that I'm in. And I don't think about the demographic. I think about the projects that I want to work on, and I try to deliver them to the very highest level that I can do. I set my bar very high, and I just feel like it's all organically grown, man. If somebody who likes my music follows me into this area, then awesome. If they don't, that's fine. I mean, I'll gain new friends and fans from the Broadway world that that is all new to me, but I don't think about it in terms of who's this going to appeal to or anything like that. I just try to make a cool project, and I always try to bite off something bigger than I can chew and see if I can digest it.
Now, you have so many different, as you said, different musical areas. When did you start getting interested in music? Was it as a kid, or how did this start?
Yeah, man, I was in a band with my two older brothers, and another kid from the neighborhood. We had a 4-piece band, and my parents were in a jazz band. My mom sang and played cocktail drum, and my dad played bass in a trio with another guy that played piano. So I remember from as far back as I can remember, I mean, they were playing in clubs, and they brought us, instruments at a very early age, and, of course we play together, so we had a band. I mean, I was playing professionally for a few dollars by the time I was 8 years old, so.
Wait, 8 years old? What instrument? What were you playing? What instrument?
Bass and sang. We all sang and we played bass, and my dad would take us to the gig, and we played, the elementary school, or we'd get some gigs, and then it developed from elementary school to the junior high, to the high school, to the clubs, and I've just every cover song of the 70s known to man, and I went through every incarnation of different genre changes from, I remember when the Beatles came, and then Led Zeppelin, and then disco, and, punk, and all that stuff. I mean, I went through all that, and I played all that stuff. And then when I was 16, that's when I started studying classical guitar, but I learned very early that I didn't really want to be a great instrumentalist, so I don't actually, quote, play classical music. I just hear the music, so I compose the music and put it in front of the players that can do it. I'm a good instrumentalist, and I feel like I'm a better singer than instrumentalist, but I'm not one of these guys that compose the music.
Now, 16, I mean, what drew you to classical music when you're 16? I mean, a lot of us who listen to rock and roll and stuff like that and different albums, the Steve Miller Band, Styx. What brought you to classical music at that young age? Because it is a pretty young age, unless you're involved in playing in a high school orchestra.
Well, a lot of people, like the people that end up in Juilliard, they start at 6 years old playing piano, so that was actually late. But I was the kind of person that recognized, well, I was very drawn to different kinds of music when I heard Bach and Baroque music especially. So I wanted to learn classical guitar just to become, more engaged in that side of it. And then I took ballet, which really opened my whole horizon to Stravinsky, Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff, all the kind of great ballet composers, Debussy, Ravel. And that's when I really was like, wow, people wrote this music. Oh my God, that's a whole nother deal. So I listened a lot for a very long time, took some music lessons, tried to, I didn't read and write. I did do piano, so I could kind of read bass and treble clef and stuff. And of course I could read treble clef from guitar, but as time went on, I procrastinated, quite frankly, a lot, because I knew at one time in my life that I wanted to be a classical composer, and it wasn't until I was 35 when the grunge thing took over the 80s thing, and we were all kind of out of a job, and I thought, well, I'm going to just go back and study. So I went to University of New Mexico and found a composition and theory teacher who kind of put me through the rigorous training of what you would do at university. But I was 35 by then, and then I spent easily 10 years just in the books trying to learn, how to do it all.
Well, you said, the grunge came along, and so you guys were out of a job. Is that very frustrating? And it seems like for you it was actually very rewarding because you went an avenue that you procrastinated about.
Well, I was like adapt and overcome, and I never, when we made it big, I was like, okay, this could last for the rest of my life or one more week. I never felt secure in the idea that I was a big rock star or anything like that. And I was way more interested in music, learning how to be a good musician. I want to be able to write music and have my colleagues go, yeah, that's good work. That was important to me. So it still is the most important thing to me.
Now,
so go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, so my whole mission in life is to try to just be a good musician. With every piece I write, I feel like I'm starting over,
Now, how did you get to, as you said, the rock star status? What happened? What was your first break? What got you on the map? Was it writing something for Kicks, or what was it?
Yeah, I think that was my first published piece, and then I got into Alice Cooper, and I wrote a little piece for Alice Cooper. But I'd written, I was writing and recording demos actively since I'd been very young, 12 years old. So I think I wrote my first song at 12, and so it was always about the quote originals, and just. Listen, I've written a lot of bad songs, okay? Just really like bad songs. And then, every once in a while you pop out a good one, And then, and try to overcome your weaknesses. And that's when I met Reb Beach. I was like, okay, great. You're an amazing guitar player with great ideas. And I'm I've got some good ideas. Let's put these ideas together. And I know how to arrange them. So let's do that, And that's kind of where that all began, really, with creating a sound that would get me there.
So you start creating the sound. Where do you go once you get that sound? Because it's a music industry, it's hard to get a record deal. What was your path to getting that first record deal?
Well, I met Bo Hill the producer in Denver, he was living in Denver when I was 16. I think we were the first band he ever produced other than his own band. And so he worked with me and my brothers. And then when me and my brother's band broke up, I moved to New York and was waiting tables. And he was very generously hiring me on gigs when he could. And, he produced Kicks and submitted that Bang Bang Balls of Fire track, and I got that. And then there was, he called me one day and said, I need bass on 4 songs on this Alice Cooper record that I'm producing, And so I went up there, and at that point I was a very good bass player. I mean, look, I can play bass, but I did a good job on that record, and Kane Roberts was the guitarist, and he said, hey, mentioned to Alice if we go on tour that you'd like to go, and maybe you can, come out on the road with us. And so I did that, and Alice was into it, and so got that gig, and they kind of took off from there. I decided early on that I didn't really want to be a sideman, and Alice was very generous to support me in my endeavors to go off on my own, and is still, I consider, one of my greatest mentors, and kind of piecing it together. I mean, look, anybody in a band that grows up in a rock band knows that it's really just a battleground of adapt and overcome. I mean, you just kind of, you don't have a plan B, man, so you just kind of go for it.
So Winger, when does Winger start getting their first breaks?
We got a record deal in '88, and the record came out in late '88. It was dead in the water for 6 months, but we had an agent named Nick Karras who really helped us out. He got us on the Scorpions tour, and we toured with them for a long time. And then the video took off, and then the song took off, and so we kind of got it up and running. And by the end of the maybe year and a half, we'd sold a couple million albums on that. So, we're lucky, man. But we were working very hard and good, right place at the right time. Although, we came very early. I mean, if we'd come 3 years earlier with the same album, it might have worked out even better. I don't know.
Now, do you think did videos help you at all? Because it's so funny. I talk to people, and videos used to be so important. And you're a good-looking guy, so the video is going to help you. Do you think the video also played a part in your group becoming more popular?
Absolutely. I mean, Reb and I were writing the first album. We had MTV on nonstop, and to my left was David Coverdale, and to my right was Def Leppard. So we kind of followed suit in that, and did our best to kind of get in the flow of it. The mistake we made is that we were much more progressive than most of the bands, and we were a little bit misrepresented on that, but it was our own fault. We kind of did the Bon Jovi vibe, and as far as the way we looked, and so, but it worked for us. I mean, we had a great time, and I don't have any regrets about it. It was a little bit, there was a little bit more under the hood in Winger than say a Poison. But having said that, I mean, Poison was way more successful than Winger, so there's no value judgment. It was just a kind of a different thing.
Now, as Warren's getting bigger, how is your life changing? Because it has to be bigger shows. How are you staying grounded?
Oh, like I say, I mean, I never believed it. It was just kind of like, this is what you do now, and you just take a day at a time. And I knew that it could go away as fast as it came. So for me, I didn't change. Everybody around me changed, because all of a sudden I'm a famous person, and everybody else is all like, they all change, But I never changed, dude. I mean, if you ask any of my friends, I'm exactly the same as I was when I was 18.
Now, you guys broke up just because it was the music was changing, or how did that? What happened?
With Winger?
Yeah.
We never broke up, man. We just were in the onslaught of grunge, and we were like, okay, there's nothing to do here. Let's disband for a while and go our separate ways, and wait for the the hurricane to dissipate. And then in 2002, we got offered the Poison tour, and we went out with them. And and then in 2006, we came out with a new album, and kind of did some touring, and then did another one in 2008, 2006, 2010, and then 2014. So we've been doing a record every 4 years. Normally, it's a bit of a time in between, but each guy in the band is very busy, so we're, we did it and when we could. Rev's been the longest surviving member of Whitesnake. He's been in the band 15 years, so we get together with Winger as a labor of love because we really enjoy playing with each other, and it's our first love. And now we're getting ready to make a new album, and we'll see if we might just completely come back together like we did in the beginning.
Now, you had moved to New Mexico when you started your solo career to study. How did that studying affect your solo work when you were starting out?
Well, I didn't go to New Mexico to study. I went to New Mexico because I was living in Miami and got hit by Hurricane Andrew, and I was like, man, I'm going to go to the desert. And I had some friends in Santa Fe, so I moved to Santa Fe, and I did an album there, and then my first wife passed away in a car wreck, and then I couldn't really, the band was disbanded, so I thought, okay, now I'm going to study classical music. So I did it then, and I put another album out then, and so it was really like food to a starving man, for studying music theory, because it was like I'd taken the rock songwriting as far as I could go, and then to get some, an injection of new ideas and free my mind of, I don't know how into music theory you are, but I studied post-tonal music and got really into like abandoning keys and traditional diatonic music, and it really freed me up to, I had a whole creative explosion during that time. So it affected me profoundly. Whereas before you might get stumped on a song because you don't know where to go, and now I'm like, I had to reel myself in because there were so many possibilities.
What would you say your focus and sound was for your solo albums?
There wasn't one. I was just completely, I said, my only criteria when I first did my solo albums was that I wasn't going to use super heavy metal guitars, and that I wasn't going to scream like I did in 17. I was going to develop a whole new way to sing. Those were the only criteria. Everything else was completely experimental. I was heavily influenced like Peter Gabriel and that whole kind of English pop thing, and which I had been in way before I was even in Winger. I was a huge fan of English pop in the 80s, and so I kind of did a bit of my take on that, and out of that became a sound over the next 3 albums that I did.
Now, how was your writing style changing, especially since you got more into theory? Did you notice a change in your writing style?
Well, a good song is a good song with a good arrangement, so the architecture of the stuff doesn't change much, although, you can stretch the template here and there, mostly harmonically, and freeing up ideas for sounds and arrangements that you wouldn't normally hear, and melodies that weren't so typical. A lot of rock songs you'll hear, singers will write a melody and it's all like blues, minor third one, na 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 na. That's like half the rock songs that came out of the 80s. And so I started just really expanding my horizons melodically, and if I do say I have a gift, it would be for melody. So the rest of it comes hard fought. A lot of studying and a lot of painful throwing out of ideas that I don't think are up to par. But I can write a melody, and I tried to make those melodies more and more unique. And I learned devices by studying classical composition. I would learn more devices to be able to expand on those ideas.
Now, the solo work, I know my friend Elliot McGuff's, he said you were in Hickory the other night. What do you do when you go on the road on a solo show that you're just doing? I know you have a few shows coming up. What can people expect to see when that happens?
Man, I play with a percussionist, and we play all the Winger hits, and I do a lot of my solo stuff, and I sing a song from my musical, and I bring people up to sing. Very audience interactive, funny. I like to talk to the audience and just have fun. I mean, there's nothing uptight about it, and I've developed it. I was one of the originators of the whole Unplugged thing. I mean, I've been doing it since 95, 96. So... and it just developed organically over time. People would request more songs, and now I can easily knock out a 2-hour show and, play everybody's requests and, make sure I get all the hits in there. I love to play all the music. There's nothing I don't enjoy playing and singing at my solo stuff.
Now, the classical, how did you tackle that mountain? Because I know I believe you were Grammy nominated. How did you knew you wanted to do it, but how does one go about getting into that, especially because you are known as a rock star? I don't know if classical musicians are snobby, or I mean, how did you get on that path and then start becoming successful in it?
I would just say that I was true to my heart, really. I mean, it sounds cheesy, man, but I really had a love for the genre, and I really wanted to learn it, and I wanted to speak in their language completely. I didn't want any favors, and I didn't want anything given to me. I wanted to earn it all, and so I worked really hard to understand how to articulate an oboe, for example. And there's a lot of stuff to learn in their language, and they don't want you to come in and expect them to interpret your music just because you're a famous person. I mean, it doesn't work like that, So I went out of my way to be as articulate as I could, and I'm still learning because it's a never-ending process. So I don't know everything by any stretch of the imagination, but I really wanted to earn it on an organic level, and that's kind of how I went about it. And I had a lot of lucky breaks, man. A good friend of mine introduced me to choreographer Christopher Wheeldon, who's a super famous choreographer, and he happened to like a piece I sent him and choreographed it on San Francisco Ballet, which became quite a hit. And then from there, the conductor there dug my music and wanted to make an album, so I wrote Nijinsky, and we made an album, and I mean, it all just happened very organically. I was just trying to do my best work, and I was very committed to it. And I will say that I've got a lot of plates spinning, and it's difficult to manage it time-wise.
Now, you said, like, the oboe, figure out how this. How do you figure out all these instruments, like the piccolo? There's instruments that people don't even know that are in classical music. How do you go about finding them and learning what you're going to convey?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of books on orchestration. I mean, you can just go on Amazon and buy a book on orchestration and start reading it, and then go find a piccolo player at your local orchestra and say, hey, man, how does this instrument work? What are the do's and don'ts? Like, can you play this? And you write something out, and they go, well, it'd be better if it was like that. And I've spent a lot of time with a lot of different players in every section, learning about what they want to see on a score, what's possible, what isn't. You have to know the range of every instrument. You have to know general fingerings and ways, like, for instance, the wind and brass. I mean, you have to calculate how long they can hold a breath, or string players, what's possible with speed on a riff or something like that. And the ranges of the instruments. I said that already, but I mean, and blending and the general sonorities of what sound, like if it does a clarinet sound good with a viola, or this kind of stuff. And a lot of it comes very naturally to me, and that's why I do it. I don't recommend it if you're not. It's the kind of thing where if you can live without it, absolutely don't do it, because it's really, really. For me, Brahms said composing is torture, and I'm with him. I mean, it's very, very torturous. It's not enjoyable, but it's something that you have to do. So, people think of Kip Winger, Mr. 17, the happy-go-lucky rock star. I couldn't be farther. I'm the antithesis of what people think. I mean, I'm the dark and brooding artist guy, and I have a lot of fun, but I take it extraordinarily seriously, and I'm very hard on myself.
Now, with the classical music, where do you want to go with that now? Do you want to keep doing that because now the musical? I mean, how you said how you have so many plates going. How do you choose what plate is going to be served next?
I just go on a timeline, like what's up in the queue for what needs to happen next. I've got a thing I got to deliver by, June of next year for a classical piece. I want to get a record with Winger out by 2020. And, so things just, I've got a lot of songs for a solo album, but they're, these other things take precedence. So, and I'm gigging all the time because that's the main source of my income. So, I'm always a bit behind the 8 ball. I'm catching up, but I just keep putting stuff in the queue,
Well, how do you, I mean, when you have a deadline, you said it's one thing, and you write songs. How do you write from different genre to genre? If there's not a deadline, I mean, you said you have a bunch of solo songs. Then you want to do a Winger album. Then you have a classical piece you can do. How do you figure out which one you're going to write? Is it just how you're inspired that day, or is it something that you?
Well, no, I'm with the symphony. I'm writing my symphony number 1, and I'm scheduling time to write, and I get down to business. I don't wait for inspiration. I believe that's complete farce. If you want to be a good musician, it's like going to the gym. You can't have pumped up muscles if you don't go to the gym and do 4 reps on each muscle, every day. You just can't do it. So I schedule writing time, and then I go, and within that, I use inspiration to go, okay, I'd like to work on this right now, or that part of this music, or, I might take a detour to work on a solo song or something because I got an idea immediately in my head. And it's, dude, I'm 40 years in, so I mean, I'm pretty, I'm not a newbie at it. I can organize pretty well, and I also am very good at knowing what song goes with which brand,
Now, the record business. Is there a difference between when you're releasing something that's classical compared to something rock? How do those businesses differ?
I'm sorry, say it again. The phone broke up.
When you release a classical album and you release the rock album, how do those record companies differ? Like, you all hear stories about crazy stuff with the old rock days and trying to get people to, the record deals. But classical, you never hear about these crazy classical record executives. How do the two worlds differentiate when you're releasing an album?
Well, I mean, listen, nowadays with the internet and what's going on now, there isn't really anything different. I mean, there's a different template for the people that all the same, man. You put out a record for release digitally or on a CD, it's all the same. There's no difference. It's just that maybe the people that work at Naxos, which is a classical label, they're a little bit different personality types than that might work at my record company for the rock band Frontiers. They're a small group of rocker guys from Italy. They're going to behave a little differently, but the process is exactly the same because it's really just the only thing different is the actual music. Think about it like breakfast cereal. There's Cocoa Puffs, Corn Flakes, Frosted Flakes. the content is different, but the way to market it, it's all the same, man. You just you ship it out to the grocery store and see who wants to buy it.
Now, what was it like getting nominated for a Grammy? And did you go to the awards?
I did go to the awards, and it was absolutely amazing. I wasn't expecting it. I thought it was the biggest long shot on the. I was like, to get nominated for classical composition and to be on the list of the other 4 composers that I was on it's the greatest honor of my whole life, man. It was absolutely surreal because looking from where I came from to get all the way from where I came from and traverse all that ground to get over into that arena, speaking on their language and getting respect in that genre by those people, because I know what it's like with being on the Grammy committee, and man, it's not easy to get past the judgment of the judges, man. I mean, it's hard, man. So that was a great honor, and absolutely, I was surprised, man. I was very happy. Let's put it that way. And I felt like, the best way to come back from Beavis and Butthead is to get a Grammy nomination for classical composition, because then, Lars and all those, the Metallica with the darts on the poster and all that stuff, I could have drank myself to death like Janie Lane, or I could have put my nose to the grindstone and pull myself out of it on a level that other people, frankly, wouldn't want to take it on,
Now, you had mentioned earlier that you took ballet when you were younger, and then in San Francisco they had a ballet production. What was that like for you, for someone who probably when he took ballet was to learn music and just get in touch with that musical type? What was it like when you saw a ballet from your music?
Funny thing is I always, when I studied ballet, I was like, man, I want to write music for ballet, because I was a good dancer. I could have been a dancer. I didn't get the training early enough, but I was very in love with it. It was incredible, and so I wanted to write music for ballet, and so to be able to put my music, and by the way, I went right to the top. Chris choreographed on the greatest American ballet company in the whole United States. Incredible, man. So it was a thrill of a lifetime. Come on, it was incredible. So, ironically, I've solicited my music to a lot of choreographers to no avail, and so now I'm writing purely concert music and been accepted as a concert composer without the adjunct of the ballet, which is, in my mind, even more incredible. But I started out just little old me wanted to write some ballet music, really. That's where I started.
Now, when you are doing these compositions, do you know when they first start playing it if something's a little bit off, and do you tweak that, or do you let the musician go with it?
No, man. No, at first it was very intimidating to go in and, try to fix scores on the spot, because I'm not a great sight reader, and, it's nerve-wracking, man, but I'm pretty adamant about fixing stuff on the fly now. Now that I know, at first it was a little bit like, okay, prove yourself, dude.
Right.
Now that I've proven myself, I can like take a deep breath and walk up to the concert master and say, hey man, could you change this thing over here? And a lot of the section people, and by the way, classical musicians, they're not snobby, man. They're really cool. They get a bad rap. They're all very open to all kinds of music, and people forget that. Yes, they do the classical series, but one of the most popular things is the pop series. So, Styx will come in and play with the orchestra, or, the Eagles with the orchestra. They're doing pop music all the time, all over the world, in every orchestra, They're very open-minded. All they want is to play good music, but that's all anybody wants, to be involved with. You don't want to be involved with bad music. So my experience is that they've been very welcoming. Yes, I had to prove myself in their language. They didn't want to, do me any favors, but once I was able to prove myself, everybody's super generous, and it's a fun environment to be in.
Well, you talk about the orchestras. I saw The Who backed by an orchestra, and it was the violinist they had was amazing. At Bob O'Reilly, she just crushed it. Would you ever think of doing Winger with an orchestra?
Yeah, I've thought about it, and then I thought, sit down until the feeling goes away, man. I did one orchestra show with the Colorado Symphony, where I'm from. And I think, that was enough for me. I don't like to mix that genre, although on my musical I did, but my composition is very integrated. It's not like rock band with some arrangements behind it. My musical integrates the two things seamlessly, when one takes up where the other leaves off. In a rock band with an orchestra behind them, it's fighting with volume levels. And oftentimes the arrangements are very banal, and it's just kind of like the effect is gone now, because it's, when it was first originated by a few people in the beginning, maybe it was cool, but it's not my thing, man. Like I stay pure to the genre of classical music, pure to the genre of rock music. I mean, that's not to say that I may do it sometime, but it's a long shot. I don't love that.
Now, I know that in February you're playing the Monsters of Rock cruise. What's that like when you get back in front of a rock and roll crowd? And it's a crowd that, has aged, because, I mean, I'm sure you have touched a lot of generations because people bring their kids. But what's it like when you get on stage with your rock and roll, with Winger, and people are just singing back to you? Do you still get that great feeling? Because you've also dealt with a whole orchestra doing your music, so you've had two just amazing feelings. What is it like, though? Does the rock star in you come out when you're playing and the crowd's going crazy?
Sure, man. I mean, I'm a born performer. I feel very comfortable on stage, and it's, the thing about music is that music is interactive with an audience. I mean, music in your living room where you're playing it, I mean, that's okay, but that's if you want to practice. I mean, if you really want to do music, you got to get in front of an audience, or put your music in front of an audience. That's where it's at. Music is an emotional language, so you're speaking a dialogue with the emotional body of human beings. And that's where the excitement comes from, is that you're actually having an emotional dialogue with people, man. So one is not better than the other, dude. It's if I have a big giant piece of music with an orchestra, I'm still connecting to the same emotional body of a human being that I would be if we're playing, a heavy rock song in front of a rock audience. It's just a different bandwidth of emotion. So that's the only way I look at it.
Now, when it comes to orchestra, which is there one that you can definitely say is your favorite instrument to deal with, and one that's your least favorite?
Orchestra?
Yeah.
Oh, God, no, I don't have enough experience to even say that. I've been very lucky to work with some great orchestras, and I have not yet worked with an orchestra that's bad.
No, I mean an actual instrument that frustrates you, or an instrument you just love to write for.
Oh, I mean, I love to write for bassoon, and I'm getting better at writing for solo violin. I'm going to write a violin concerto next year, and so I'm really getting into that. That's extremely difficult, but I like I'm really in love with the bassoon, and I like sections. I like to play with sounds in the winds and stuff like that. And of course, strings are the heart of the orchestra. But I don't really have any favorites. I mean, it's each instrument in the orchestra and beyond, by the way, because there's a lot of composers that add in instruments that aren't organically in an orchestra. But you just think of it like the human soul. I mean, you speak to different levels of the DNA in the emotional body. Like an oboe can speak to a very specific part of your soul, and a cello can speak to a very specific part of your soul, and they're not the same.
Now, you mentioned you might have a new Winger album coming out. What will the focus of the music be on that? do you always creating the same sound, or how is the writing process for that?
Me and Reb have a thing, man. We sit down with a drum machine, we knock out Winger songs, and I just try to make sure that the bar is raised high enough to where we're not repeating ourselves in a banal way. I don't want to just do the same song over and over and over again, like so many rock albums. You hear bands that's trying to recreate their past. I want to move forward and create some cool music that stands the test of time and raises the bar for us, So for every Winger album, there's something different on there that wasn't there before,
Now, what is your long-term goal for Get Jack?
Well, hopefully we get into the theater, and being on Broadway or being in London, just trying to get it up on stage, man. It's been a learning curve, and like, I live my life with no expectation. What I do is I try to do the best work I can, hope for the best, and see where it takes me. I don't cry over things that don't work out. Like I say, I just put my best foot forward and let the universe dictate where it's going to take me.
Well, good luck with Get Jack. And it would be great if it was in the theater. It'd be a lot more work for you because you probably have to be hanging out on Broadway a lot, but that doesn't really seem like work.
No, it'd be awesome, man. I'd love it.
Well, I want to thank you, Kip, for coming on. You've had such a great career, and it's amazing because, as you said, so many rockers, they don't have that separate side. I talk to a lot of rock and rollers, and a lot of them don't even read music, and they just learn by themselves, and it's just impressive how much stuff you know.
Thank you, but I will say that, because reading music doesn't mean anything. It's just a different form of communication. Paul McCartney, the Beatles did all their whole catalog. They didn't read music. There's nothing about reading music that means anything. It's a vehicle for me to communicate in a different genre. I would never, ever in a billion years put any higher value on any one genre or any way to get to the means to an end. Anybody's means to an end is their means to an end, and art is art. So there's no greater value in anything that I or anybody else does over anybody else, man. That's just, I do it the way my brain works. Other people, do it the way their brain works, and that's the glory of art and what we can give back to the world and all of that kind of thing.
Does your brain ever get tired? You have so much going on.
Oh man, I'm constantly overwhelmed, But I long for the day I could just sit in Paris and write string quartets. But that ain't gonna happen anytime soon.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on. People, go to kipwinger.com. The new CD. Now the new CD's coming. You got a pre-sale up to the 19th, I believe.
Yeah. So if anybody, you can go to getjack.com and pre-order the album there 19th, and we're doing a guitar giveaway that's going through the 24th, I believe. Maybe don't quote me on that. It might be the 26th, the week after the release of the album. And it's a really cool guitar giveaway. We've had a Facebook ad out there. You can see the guitar and stuff. But if you dig it, we'd love it if you ordered it. And if you don't dig it, not a problem. So
people, go check it out, and you will dig it. It's good stuff. Check out and go to kipwinger.com. Go to my website, coopertalk.net. You can find over 725 episodes. Email me, Cooper at coopertalk.net. You can Twitter, follow me at coopertalk, and my Instagram is coopertalk1. So remember, I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guest. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you guys next time.